Galactic Academy's Hall of Aspirants was an imposing structure, one designed to make even the hardiest students gulp with a mix of awe and dread. Massive, polished metal arches reached for the skies of Starhold Station, the Academy's orbiting headquarters. Inside, aspiring cadets of all species from across the Galactic Confederation were being funneled toward a challenge that had become legend: the Arkturus Trial. The trial was notoriously difficult, with a 0% success rate in over 3 millennia. No one had even come close. The impossibility of the trial was by design, and for good reason. Created by the founding members of the Academy, it served as a reminder to students that limits existed, that some challenges could not be conquered by strength, intellect, or cunning alone. But today, on the edge of a circular platform surrounded by a council of alien observers, stood one Marcus Kellen, a human, and the only member of his species at the Academy. He scratched his chin absent-mindedly as he eyed the challenge ahead. Cadet Kellen drawled an insectoid instructor named Prava, his voice clicking and buzzing. "You understand that this test cannot be conquered. It is merely an exercise in futility, designed to illustrate the harsh truths of the cosmos." Sure, Marcus said with a casual shrug. "And if I happen to beat it?" Prava's eyes, all 16 of them, swiveled uncomfortably. "That has never been considered." "Good thing I'm here to give it a whirl then." The gallery erupted in whispers, various tendrils, antennae, and sensory organs twitching. No one expected a human of all beings to even dare approach the Arkturus Trial with such a blasé attitude. Prava flicked his mandibles in disbelief. "Very well. Cadet Kellen, you may begin." The trial was a series of escalating, dynamic obstacles, each requiring increasingly impossible feats of logic, reflex, and endurance. The first was a labyrinthine maze whose walls shifted constantly, forming and dissolving pathways in real time. Once inside, Marcus was met with a holographic screen displaying a timer. 2 hours, he muttered. "And this maze looks worse than trying to find the last clean sock in my laundry." With a confident grin, he broke into a jog. The walls began to move immediately, closing in, extending, and looping like a sadistic puzzle. Marcus paused to observe the shifting patterns, his eyes tracking every fluctuation. While others saw chaos, he saw potential paths forming and collapsing. Years of navigating the crowded, unpredictable streets of New Manhattan prepared him for this. Sprinting, sliding, and even diving under snapping walls, Marcus pushed through with calculated daring. Where others tried to outthink the labyrinth, Marcus adapted to its rhythm like a dancer to music. 30 minutes in, gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. He was already halfway through the maze. Prava buzzed nervously. "Unprecedented. This deviation is unusual." Marcus pressed forward, but the labyrinth wasn't done. Sudden bursts of flame erupted from openings in the ground, sending waves of heat searing through the passage. Thick clouds of noxious gas spewed into the corridors. Marcus coughed and fumbled in his jacket pocket, retrieving an old filter mask he'd borrowed from a maintenance closet weeks earlier. He slipped it on, the charred and scratched visor giving him just enough visibility to proceed. "Should have asked for a health waiver," he quipped through the mask as he dove past another flaming corridor, barely singed. After emerging from the maze, drenched in sweat and reeking of singed hair, Marcus was greeted with what appeared to be a shimmering pool. Unlike water, this liquid twisted and writhed, disobeying gravity. It was alive, sentient, and only one objective was clear across it. He dipped a finger experimentally. The surface rippled and pulled, threatening to consume him entirely. "Well, you look friendly," Marcus said, his voice slightly muffled. He glanced over at Prava, who observed with restrained panic. No one had made it this far before. Marcus inhaled deeply and improvised, as humans so often did. He rummaged through his utility belt, finding a bundle of microcharges he'd been saving for a rainy day. Rewiring the charges, he pressed them to his palms and launched himself over the shifting surface, creating periodic explosions to push him through the air. The sentient liquid hissed and reared, but Marcus was already sailing over it in a series of arcing leaps. He landed on the far side with a roll, panting and exhilarated. "That's got to be a personal best," he said, brushing himself off. Prava's mandibles clacked frantically. He turned to a colleague, a bulbous-headed Zarnari named Relix. This cannot continue. He will perish. Relix, who was responsible for monitoring contestants' health metrics, shook his fleshy head. No, Prava, he's actually quite stable. Heart rate elevated but normal. Adrenaline levels high, but within acceptable human parameters. Human parameters are insanity, Prava hissed. The third phase awaited, known simply as the void, a swirling expanse of nothingness extended before Marcus. Other challengers had stepped in and never returned. Records indicated they were swallowed by their own doubts, consumed by fears given physical form. Marcus paused, staring at the rippling energy. A soft light flickered on his wristband, the only piece of technology allowed during trials. The light was an old memento from Earth, a photo of his sister. Marcus took a deep breath, his voice low. One more step. Steeling himself, he stepped into the void. Whispers began immediately, thoughts of failure, of inadequacy. Illusions shimmered before him, friends he'd failed, enemies that still haunted his past. The air grew dense, as if the fabric of reality itself was pressing against him. Marcus grinned. This was the kind of mental warfare he thrived on. Nice try, he muttered, clenching his fists. He focused inward, on every defeat he'd suffered, every misstep he regretted. But for each doubt, there was a memory of overcoming it, of surviving the worst and laughing afterward. He punched through an apparition of his greatest rival with a laugh, leaping into the air and dodging more phantasms. His laughter echoed, disrupting the illusions. The void faltered. He fights with humor, Relix whispered incredulously. Marcus ran and leapt, refusing to slow. Each step weakened the void. Finally, with one last leap, he breached its edge, landing on a solid platform surrounded by stunned instructors. Prava stepped forward. Cadet Kellen. What drives you? Marcus gave a lopsided smile. I don't know, but I bet there's at least another 5 phases to go, right? What's next? Flying snakes? Reverse gravity? Maybe a really angry pet? The council convened frantically, but Marcus wasn't finished. He had broken past 3 impossible phases, and all he saw was potential for more challenges. Prava, for the first time in centuries, felt hope mingled with dread. Perhaps. There is more, he said quietly, eyeing the human who refused to accept that impossible truly meant impossible. The council reconvened quickly, mandibles clicking, tendrils waving, and energy pulsating in shared disarray. Behind closed crystalline panels, alien advisors and instructors debated what to do. Nothing had prepared them for a human of all species, to conquer the first 3 phases of the Arkturus Trial. Prava's voice was a constant thread of panic. He must be stopped before we breach containment protocols, Prava insisted, shaking a set of mechanical appendages. The trial was not constructed with completion in mind. The safety systems, they could destabilize. Perhaps we underestimated humans, Relix countered. Their survival adaptations are more complex than anticipated. Outside the council chambers, Marcus lounged on a stone platform while catching his breath. The trial wasn't exactly forgiving in terms of breaks, but this momentary pause let him wipe sweat from his forehead and flash a thumbs up to a few bewildered spectators beyond the energy field. With renewed vigor, the instructors emerged from their deliberations. Cadet Kellen, Prava said, his voice hollow. You may continue. At your own peril. Great. I love a little peril. Marcus cracked his neck. What's next? The stone platform beneath him rumbled, then lurched downward with shocking speed. Marcus gripped the edge, wind rushing past as he plummeted through a narrow chasm illuminated by erratic bursts of blue lightning. The stone came to a sudden halt, throwing Marcus forward and landing him in a roll on a broad surface. When he got his bearings, he realized where he was: the inner fractum. The fractum was a disjointed plane of shifting gravity fields and fractured physical laws. Small chunks of land floated around like islands on a tempestuous sea, and pulses of raw energy arced between them with the force of small suns. The challenge here was both survival and navigation. All right, Marcus, he murmured to himself. You can handle a little floating chaos. Just don't think about what it'll do to your insides. The first step was recalibrating to the shifting gravity fields. He took a tentative jump to a floating rock, and was nearly hurled sideways when its field altered midair. He crashed onto it with a thud, feeling gravity pull him awkwardly to the left. The trick, he quickly realized, was adapting faster than the fields changed. He began timing his movements to the pulses, leaping from one rock to the next, just as gravity stabilized and then wobbled again. From the gallery above, spectators watched with a mix of terror and admiration as Marcus navigated the shifting landscape. One of the larger rocks rotated to reveal a nest of bioelectric serpents, their glowing bodies sparking with deadly energy. Of course there'd be snakes, Marcus muttered, ducking just as a serpent lunged. He grabbed an unstable metal rod that happened to be lodged in the rock and used it like a prod, redirecting an incoming strike so that it hit a cluster of nearby snakes. They exploded in a chain reaction of electric sparks. The next platform was even trickier. Half of it was coated in slick, ever-shifting crystals that reflected heat and refracted light. Marcus squinted against the glare, already sweating. When he landed, the crystals sprang to life, altering their molecular structure to form ice-hard barriers or molten flows. He scrambled, sliding and weaving between unpredictable bursts of heat. He grabbed a broken crystal shard, using it as an improvised shield against another lava spout. "Is there a safe spot around here?" he joked. "I could really use a break." Back in the observation chamber, Prava and Relix watched, stunned. "Is he thriving?" Prava rasped. "Impossible." "He's adapting," Relix replied, awe palpable. "To adapt to the fractum is unheard of. He is not just enduring it, he is integrating with it." Marcus finally reached the far end of the fractum, where a floating obelisk hovered in the center of an energy storm. Cracks rippled across its surface, hinting at incredible power within. A holographic projection materialized, showing a ghostly instructor, a remnant of the test's creators. "To conquer this trial, you must shatter the limits of reality," the projection intoned. "Shatter reality?" Easy peasy, Marcus deadpanned. The obelisk's energy storm surged. Marcus gritted his teeth. He grabbed loose chunks of metal and rock, hurling them into the storm, observing the reactions. Each object was either vaporized or reflected back with increased speed. But there was a pattern, a tiny window of imbalance. He timed his approach carefully, hurling one last shard before diving headlong into the storm. The impact sent shock waves rippling across the platform. Marcus used the energy's chaotic pull to maneuver and redirect himself through the maelstrom. With gritted determination, he reached the core of the obelisk and slammed his fist wrapped in a fragment of resistant crystal against it. Light exploded outward. The energy field collapsed and Marcus was thrown back, landing in a heap on the ground as silence descended. When he stood, battered but victorious, the council chamber above erupted into cheers and stunned cries. With trembling mandibles, Prava approached the platform as it ascended back to the observation deck. "Cadet Kellen, you have done what was never intended to be done." "Yeah, well, I've always been good at breaking stuff," Marcus grinned. "There remains one last test," Prava continued, his voice quavering. "The trial of understanding. Only by confronting the truth of your journey here will it be complete." Marcus cocked an eyebrow. "Confronting the truth? Sounds like therapy, but sure, let's do this." The final challenge was unexpectedly serene, a circular chamber with softly glowing lights and shifting holographic memories from Marcus's life. The disorienting trials, the laughs he'd shared with fellow cadets, the faces of his family back on Earth. Voices spoke in unison, sometimes soothing, other times harsh and accusatory. The trial demanded Marcus acknowledge his fears, his doubts, and even the toll of his relentless ambition. Where others had broken, Marcus embraced it all. "This is who I am," he said softly, the words steady and clear. "A mess of a man who survives by being too stubborn to quit." The chamber's glow dimmed. The trial was over. Marcus stepped out to find every eye on him. He had done the impossible, and he had done it the only way a human could, through defiance, ingenuity, and a bit of reckless charm. "Cadet Kellen, you have passed the Arkturus Trial," Prava announced, both horrified and elated. "And you have redefined what is possible." Marcus gave a thumbs up, utterly casual. "Does that mean I get a medal, or just a really uncomfortable round of applause?" The council erupted in laughter and cheers. For the first time in thousands of years, the impossible was possible, and it came at the hands of a resilient human. Marcus's name would be etched in galactic history. The Arkturus Trial would never be the same, and neither would the galaxy's view of humanity. As Marcus walked out, he heard whispers about him being offered a seat on the council, perhaps even more. He rolled his eyes. "Let's hope the next test is harder," he muttered. Above, the stars shimmered in silent agreement. Despite the wild celebrations and the unprecedented success, Marcus Kellen wasn't ready to call it a day. He stood amid the confetti shower and enthusiastic roars from spectators of every species, his body aching, his mind exhausted, but his heart beating with something closer to disbelief than triumph. Sure, he'd completed the Arkturus Trial, but the notion that he'd redefined what was possible struck him as premature. After all, what did it even mean? Prava, the insectoid instructor, broke through the throngs to approach Marcus, accompanied by relics and a cadre of high-ranking council members. The group collectively projected awe, discomfort, and a hint of fear. For beings who thrived on rigid structure, the unknown territory of possible impossibility was unsettling. Cadet Kellen Prava began, his mandibles vibrating. "You have not only completed the Arkturus Trial but altered its very premise. The implications are vast. There must be discussions, deliberations." Marcus sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "So, no medal, huh?" Relix emitted a blobby chuckle. "We would rather offer you something far more significant than medals or accolades. Your success defies our understanding and raises profound questions about what limits exist if they exist at all." The council nodded solemnly. "Would you consider joining the Academy's council to help reshape future trials?" another elder asked, their voice resonating with centuries of tradition and restraint. Marcus took a moment to process. Council position? He'd barely managed to pass basic galactic etiquette class without embarrassing himself, and now they wanted him to be a decision-maker? The weight of it didn't make sense. It felt like handing a flamethrower to a toddler. "Look," he said, trying to sound respectful but honest, "I get that this is a big deal. But isn't it a bit early to toss me into politics? I'm still figuring out where the cafeteria serves the best protein paste." The crowd erupted into scattered laughter. Somehow, Marcus's ability to downplay the monumental had an almost cathartic effect on the gathered aliens. For millennia, they'd treated these trials as sacred, untouchable milestones. Marcus's irreverence cut through that with unsettling ease. Prava stepped forward again. "Cadet, if you choose to decline, the council respects your wishes. However, we must insist on one last responsibility: a debriefing for future generations." "Debriefing," Marcus echoed warily. "It will require you to retrace your path through the Arkturus Trial," Relix clarified, "but this time under observation, for archival purposes." "Oh, like a how I did it walkthrough?" Marcus asked. "Great, I'll bring popcorn." 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself once again standing before the entrance to the now famous Arkturus Trial, only this time, hundreds of researchers, instructors, and elite cadets hovered at the edges of each challenge zone, documenting everything. Crystal recording devices floated around him like eager pets. The excitement of the observers was palpable. They wanted to understand how a human one with no specialized abilities, no technological implants, and no political pedigree could do what no one else had done. "All right," Marcus announced, raising his voice to reach the assembled masses. "Welcome to the trial you all thought couldn't be beaten. Here's step one: don't think too hard." He stepped forward into the shifting maze, and the platforms realigned as they had before. Marcus paused, exaggerating each of his movements for the eager spectators, like a showman performing a trick he wasn't even sure he'd be able to pull off a second time. Note to self, he murmured with a wry smile, "Next time, don't make history. It's exhausting." The maze adjusted rapidly, clearly programmed to match the complexity Marcus had overcome during his first attempt. But this time, a side panel opened an unexpected shift. The structure was now responding to his patterns and actively attempting to change them. Panic flickered across Prava's face as he realized that even this debriefing might be more than anyone had anticipated. "That's new," Marcus said. He examined the changed corridor and the rippling blue light that emanated from its depths, new and shiny. This is what we call an experiment. Instead of moving away, Marcus charged toward the anomaly, catching everyone off guard. A tense silence blanketed the arena as Marcus reached the rippling light and touched it. The field shimmered and exploded outward, revealing a hidden chamber beneath the maze's surface. Marcus found himself suspended in a shimmering void, the real heart of the trial. A voice echoed. Not the programmed voice of the previous holographic instructors, but something raw, vast, and ancient. "Why do you seek to conquer the unconquerable?" it asked, resonating through Marcus's bones. "Well, nice to meet you too," Marcus quipped, trying to sound casual despite his heart pounding in his chest. "Honestly, I'm not a fan of losing. Stubbornness is the family curse. Defiance is a weapon. But why wield it here? Look, I didn't know I'd break the trial. I just saw a challenge and couldn't walk away." The void pulsed, and Marcus felt flashes of emotion: sadness, pride, loneliness. He glimpsed images the ancient founders of the Galactic Academy, carving the trial into existence, determined to set a benchmark for all species. "You succeeded where no one was intended to. What now?" the voice pressed. Marcus hesitated, sensing the weight of this question. "What now?" he repeated. "I guess. We teach others that limits are meant to be tested, that even the impossible deserves to be punched in the face once or twice." The void hummed in response, and then the light around him faded. Marcus found himself back on the platform, standing before a stunned crowd. Relix, Prava, and the other council members exchanged glances. Whatever Marcus had encountered, it had transcended their understanding. "It spoke to you?" Prava asked, his voice faint. Marcus nodded. "Yep, nice guy. A little existential but good heart." The council whispered. Relix stepped forward. "Then the trial is complete. Marcus Kellen, you've not only surpassed the impossible, you've revealed its true purpose. It was never meant to be beaten alone, but understood. The burden of that understanding is yours." "No pressure," right? Marcus quipped. But despite the jokes, he felt the enormity of the moment settle around him. The galaxy's limits had shifted, and while Marcus had no idea what came next, he did know one thing: humans weren't done surprising anyone. As cheers erupted anew, Marcus grinned and muttered under his breath, "All right, Arkturus Trial, consider yourself thoroughly broken." Somewhere, far beyond the reach of any observer, the remnants of an ancient trial flickered, perhaps amused. The story of the impossible test had changed forever, and at the heart of it stood one unpredictable, defiant human who showed that sometimes the only way to break a rule was to refuse to play by it.